What's up, everybody? It's your boy MJ. Welcome to the Black Wine Guy Experience Before the Pour, aka 20 Questions with MJ. My guest today is an artist, an art historian, a wine collector, a salesman, an importer, a founder of Vom Boden, Stephen Bitterolf. I was going to throw in and a father, but we're talking about that. Stephen came to New York in the early 00s to get his PhD, check it, in Northern Renaissance painting, during which time his fascination with wine was born. In 2005, he landed a job as salesperson. Don't worry, this is our blooper reel. At the newly opened Crush Wine and Spirits, one of New York City's sleekest wine stores at the time. In 2012, he became an importer of German wines, which led to his founding of Vom Boden. Vom Boden is a small company focusing on small growers. The heart of the portfolio is clearly in Germany, though they are proud to represent some small states in Austria, France, and the U.S. He later founded Riesling. How do you say Rieslingfeier?
Yeah, exactly.
There you go, Rieslingfeier, like the fire festival. And this is scary.
Ours is slightly more reputable,
but
but
you know, exactly. But at least you have wine. As long as you got wine, people will be okay with the tits.
Yeah.
That seeks to celebrate German Rieslings to provide a greater context for this incredible history of winemaking, to reemphasize the historical importance of terroir. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, man. I'm happy to be here.
Glad we finally got. We've been working on this for like fucking 6 months.
It's been a while, but we've had some fun in between.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
number of Riesling studies and dinners, so
it's all good. All right, to warm us up a bit, I'm going to start by asking you some personal questions, followed by James Lipton's 10 famous questions from inside the extra studio. All right? So just answer them quickly, whatever comes top of your head. All right?
Now I'm nervous.
I know. You should be. No. What is your favorite book?
Whew. Like I should answer quickly, huh? Favorite book? Man. J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye. Just do something a little cliche and old school.
That's cliche and old school, and okay. It's a good book. I have one. My people hunting.
I was trying to find a book that wasn't on German wine or wine in general. It's just so sad.
That's so funny.
One of my great shames is mostly everything I read is about wine, which is just a time thing.
Hey, it makes sense. What is your favorite movie?
Ghostbusters, obviously.
Yeah, and we're talking the original Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
not the
yes,
because they're on it. There's
like Ghostbusters.
There's a third iteration now,
man.
You know,
the old school one. The first one was like a soundtrack, like a dance, a movie.
Ray Parker Jr.
Yeah, dude. There was a lot going on. It was very formative.
It was. Favorite musical artist, group, band.
I mean, cliched, but like, can I go old school? Can I?
Yeah.
I very much like classic and kind of old music, so I'd go with Bach, which is
Oh wow,
he's a German. And
no,
like,
it works. Favorite food, last meal. What do you have, Stephen?
Last meal I had that I really enjoyed, I did some shrimp at home with like cilantro and lime. In general, I mean, there's a theme throughout my like life and living.
Mm-hmm.
Even the weather today, it's a little chilly, it's fresh, and like I'm okay with that. I like fresh. So I like limes, I like citrus, I like acid.
He likes acid.
I like, you know what I mean? It's food
like
and wine.
acid.
It's like, so they were like, it was like shrimps on the barbie with honestly just an ocean of lime and cilantro, and it's like,
nice.
I don't know, man. That's
nice.
Simple, but I like it.
Favorite athlete?
Oof, favorite athlete. I'm not a huge sports guy. I would say before he was disgraced, Lance Armstrong was an inspiration. I had leukemia when I was young, and so for someone to kind of bounce back after that was very inspirational. I'm a cyclist, so I'll go with that just because I don't really know much about sports.
Well, I will tell you, we had Bobby Stuckey on, and he's actually knew Lance.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And anyway, people do things to win. I'm not mad at him per se. But
the inspirational part of it is
exactly
more important than all that
exactly.
shit. Man, he raised hundreds of millions of dollars for cancer survivors. It's like, and frankly, not to get too like most of them were Jews.
That's
right?
what I'm saying. That's my whole point. Like at that Olympic level, people,
and he was better than all the other guys.
He just had the better juice.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah.
Anyway, favorite cartoon as a child?
Oof, man, old school. You know, like the cartoons, like the Road Runner, that sort of stuff. That was always big in the household for sure.
We were talking about our girth, our stomachs, how they're And we're not even like that big, but basically, what do you do to stay in shape? What's your exercise routine?
God. That is a huge thing, and it's funny too. People in like the food and wine business do not talk about it much, but I think they should.
Yep.
Because if this is something you're going to do for your like life career as your body evolves from like, dude, in the 20s you get away with
Do anything.
You get away with everything, and like God bless it, and I did too. Like no shame. But as you hit your 40s, I cycle a ton, I run a ton, and I just like have started working out because it's just like it catches up with you,
Yep.
And when I'm home, I have to taste a tremendous amount of wine just for my job. So it is not uncommon to open 5 to 8 bottles of wine a night. I spit almost all the time exclusive. My kids, like for me, I will walk through the kitchen and just spit like 2 feet away, into the sink, and my kids don't even bat an eyelash. And I forget that other people aren't used to that. So we have neighbors over, and I'll just be talking about the day and like, up. And they all look at like, it's just revolting for someone to spit, but I spit wine almost as much as I drink it. Not all the time, but a lot. A lot.
That is key. I need to spit more.
And man, at home, it's like not to get, I bring a little cup with me. I sit in the family room, do whatever, and just, it just,
I mean, because you have, like you said, you are constantly tasting, constantly.
And you still get a little buzz. It's okay.
Exactly. So, osmosis, the tongue.
Exactly.
Just gets in there. Favorite cold cereal to eat while you're watching cartoons growing up?
Man, growing up was a disaster. Everything that was artificially colored, like, do you remember Boo Berry?
Of course.
Yeah, dude, Boo Berry was a huge thing.
Yep.
Huge thing. Let's just say that blue dye is very strong.
I know. It was like almost like violet color.
Yeah. I was just thinking Boo Berry. Oh God.
Who's your favorite comedian?
That's interesting. I don't really watch a whole lot of comedy. I can't say. I honestly can't even reference someone that.
No big deal.
Sorry about it.
It's okay.
There are parts of me that are very charming, but there are other parts. A lot of people look at me and are just like, "What is wrong with you?" Because there are definitely a lot of like very contemporary data points that I just like don't access.
Listen, you only have. I hate to use this but you only have so much bandwidth.
It's true.
And you gotta stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? There's no point of acquiring knowledge, just acquire knowledge, unless you want to be on Jeopardy or some shit. So. Who would you most like to have a bottle of wine with?
That's interesting. I would probably say Frank Schumacher, who was like not one of the earliest by any means, but an early 20th century importer.
Oh, he's big.
Yeah, he's big.
He's pivotal. He's one of those people don't know about.
Yeah, and it's like, it's that kind of romantic age of discovery where it's like, I don't know, he left college and jumped on a steamship because like that's how you got to Europe, and he went on a steamship and he like traveled through. And to me, what's cool about it is that when he went to Europe, it was natural for someone who was interested in wine to do Bordeaux and Burgundy and Rioja and Barolo and Germany, right? These were all kind of linked up as the
premier wine region.
Yeah, that was what you did. And so he wrote one of the first, and still an inspirational book for me, one of the first, I think honestly, one of the first Americans to write about German wine, because there's a huge history of British authors writing about German wine, but one of the first, if not the first, to publish a book called The Wines of Germany in 1955, which is just, I don't know. It's a whole different time. People don't talk the way that we do about wine. It's all it's woven into a kind of like this romantic landscape of what wine is. It's a little bit like reading like the 1890s and early 20th century critics of wine when they talk about wines, and they're like, it's a very charming, effusive wine with a great spirit. And you're like, no one could do that now.
I know.
Robert Parker was like, that's a charming, effusive wine with a good, you'd be like, what? How many points?
Exactly. And I love that. I mean, I think that's what, like, I talk about wine in everyday terms. It was everyday terms. It wasn't, and it wasn't this emphasis on lemon verbena.
Yeah, exactly.
Lime essence.
I think it's a little bit like
Kumquat.
maybe to use the sports analogy, which I shouldn't because I don't know about sports, as you've already learned. But it's like when you begin doing something, you're very active about how you should, right? You should hold the ball this way, and the technique and the method. And I think for wine, a lot of it is like you want to flex that muscle. Like, do I get the lemon verbena and the whatever, the mandarin orange, blah, 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 blah. And once you know you can do that, it becomes so unimportant. And then it's just the feel, right? And the greatest athletes, they don't know what they're doing. They just do it. And they do it flawlessly. And I think that's with wine too. To me, it's oftentimes like I can tell a more mature taster because they're like, this wine is, lovely, or it has good energy or punch or whatever.
Hang on. There's definitely.
That's some drilling?
That's
Yeah.
drilling. We can't fix that. All right, we're going. Just someone lying here to say, yeah, we
Yeah.
can't. We can't.
Yeah.
We're in New York City. There's
Yeah.
noises. I mean, we're in a studio, but we are in New York City.
The fact that it's as quiet as it is kind of a miracle. So if you get 5 to like 28 seconds of silence, like God bless, you know, it can be real.
Okay. Yeah, and to your point, like, this is becoming a long before the pour, but I like the conversation. Anyway, I was doing a live last night, and someone was like, "How are the tannins?" I said, "I don't know, man. I don't have a fucking tannometer, man." I literally did, like, and I said, "Okay, if you want me to go there, I would say that these tannins are well integrated." I said, "You know, this producer friend of mine, Pastor, his wines are really they're really smoothie and they're silky. So yes, they would be well integrated." But I really said, "I don't have a tannometer. I don't have a refractometer. I've been through that phase of wine."
And you look at people and you're like, that person's beautiful. You're not like, oh yeah, like tell me about the shape and depth of their nose.
Oh,
You're
exactly,
like, what?
right,
Like
right,
it's
right,
how it all
right,
fits
right,
together,
right,
right?
right,
That's
right.
the big picture, the gestalt, and how a person moves and how they speak. Like all this tied together, like color of the eyes or shape of the nose. It's I think it's again, it's a good muscle to flex, and you need that's your entry.
Oh yeah.
But then
there comes a point where we just want to enjoy this stuff together. Yep. And then if something really jumps out, you scream it out, but you're not. You know, you're like, oh shit, because you know it gets stuck. You're like, what is that? What is that? What is that? Like, oh wait. Oh my God, that's Abercrombie and Fitch candle number 5. Frankincense and orange, you know, whatever. So, and you're like, damn, that's it.
Yep.
Okay, now we're going to turn our attention to the 10 questions made famous by James Lipton on Inside the Actors Studio.
Oh, jeez.
Steven, what is your favorite word?
Ooh, God, all these questions. There's so many great words. How about fabelhaft? There's a lot of good.
That's a good word.
That's a good one.
Damn, that's like
you haven't had that yet, huh?
We haven't had a word that good since like the first season, to be honest with you. Yeah,
fabelhaft. There's a lot of great like German words that are just like fun to say, you know. Fabelhaft.
What is your least favorite word?
Ooh, milky. I assume you get that a lot. Milky is very unpopular.
You know
really?
what's funny? That's a first. But one word that's come up at least a dozen times or more is moist.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't like it. But Skinny, that was his favorite word.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. So I was like, cool. What turns you on?
Acid. You know.
Yeah.
Freshness.
He means freshness,
energy,
not Timothy Leary acid.
Exactly. No. Well,
I mean, you know, I specifically in the context of
let's say freshness.
Well, now it is the Black Wine Guy experience, right? So are we on acid? I don't know. That would make for an interesting podcast.
That would.
Can we finish it before it really kicks in?
How coherent would it be?
What sound or noise do you love?
Piano. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, piano.
And what sound or noise do you hate?
Maybe drilling.
Yeah, right. Drilling during the recording of his podcast?
Yeah, drilling.
Yeah. Steven, what is your favorite curse word?
Probably fuck.
Yeah.
It's just like sharp.
It
is still the edgiest and
Catch-all.
most penetrating. You know what I mean? It's like boom. People you can say shit in a lot of
Yeah.
But you say fuck, people are like, ooh.
Ooh,
You know, that still has a little bite.
It does. We're not that desensitized. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
That's interesting. I was never very good at school, that sort of thing. And then in college, I got very into art history and the whole, like it just, you know, in something, not that you're not good, it just doesn't make sense and you have other things going on and blah, blah, blah. And then you get into some modality of thinking. And the last 3 years of my college career were like the most fulfilling of my life. And it was when I got an appreciation for education. So I often have thought to myself, like, if I make a fortune from selling German wine, which probably won't happen, I'd retire early, and I think I would go back to school. I think I would get a degree for the sake of just education. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
As younger people, you have to, but you think about education in terms of like access and money and how do you shape your life? And when you get to my ripe old age, it is a dream to like just be able to go for an education to learn.
Yep.
And so I've thought about this too much probably, like going back for economics because I don't understand that at all, and it kind of fascinates me.
Yep.
I do not understand it.
Yep.
I think I could go back and do a winemaking degree because that's another thing. I have no experience with that, both as the importer and in retail. The most important times are September to December. That's like that's the the season when you go into the black, hopefully.
Yeah.
And like I can't take 3 weeks to go do harvest, so I know almost nothing. I know intellectually, but I don't know
Yep.
what that really is, and I would like to do that. And then maybe, since I'm just racking up degrees,
Yeah, I know,
it's
man,
like it's so easy to do when you're talking about it. Let's get one more. I would go I'd do that art history degree.
Nice. Very nice. Conversely, what profession would you not like to do?
That's interesting. I don't know there. I mean, like maybe plumbing.
Yeah, plumbing's kind of shitty.
Like
I mean, even a
I think
kitchen sink, it's nasty.
Yeah,
man.
dude. There's a lot of like slime and stuff there, and like
build up.
Yeah, a lot of those odors I'm not a fan of.
Things living in there.
Yeah,
little microbes. Ooh.
Yeah.
And lastly, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I don't know. I mean, I guess like, good job. Like at the end, through all these like little journeys we all take, and I've said this to a lot of people. I do hope when it's over for me, people are just like, that was a good guy. He did like one or two kind things and was not a shitbag. You know what I mean? Like that's honestly, I don't know, just to live a thoughtful but also a good life where you're just like, you don't sweat the little things, and the little things are constantly fucking needling you every day. There's no doubt, but I do try to like keep the eye at the end and just like, man, I don't know, I want like a decent amount of people to show up my funeral.
There you go.
That'd be nice. Just the people be like, he was a good person. He did something nice. It's like,
totally.
That's about it.
Well, this was deep
I mean,
and fun. We're going to have a great episode. If you want more, Stephen, I know you do, make sure you tune into our episode of the Black Wine Guy Experience. Peace. Hey, everybody, what's up? It's your boy, MJ. Welcome to the Black Wine Guy Experience. My guest today is an artist, an art historian, a wine collector, a salesman, an importer, a father, and the founder of Vom Boden, Stephen Bitterolf. Stephen came to NYC in the early 00s to get his PhD in Northern Renaissance painting, during which time his fascination with wine was born. In 2005, he landed a job as a salesperson at the newly opened Crush Wine and Spirits, which at the time was one of New York City's sleekest wine stores. In 2012, he became an importer of German wines, which led to his founding of Vom Boden. Vom Boden is a small company focusing on small growers. The heart of the portfolio is clearly in Germany, though they are proud to represent small states in Austria, France, and the U.S. He later founded Rieslingfeier, no association with the Fire Festival, an annual event that seeks to celebrate German Rieslings to provide a greater context for the incredible history of winemaking and to reemphasize the historical importance of terroir. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, man. Good to be here.
Glad you're here. I mean, we're trying to get this together for a minute, and I met you through Robert Duntis, who has this amazing orbit of amazing people. Tell everybody about the wine we're drinking this afternoon.
So, man, what is the one wine to bring? And I think when people think about German wines, maybe there's a deep history there, right? And this is not necessarily an attribute of quality. Certainly, there's regions that were founded yesterday that make profound wines, but it is cool. And again, my background is art history and a little bit of cultural history, so I am certainly drawn in a little bit to the lore and the history and that kind of that cultural trail of German wine, especially. So this is a 1968 Schloss Reinhardtshausen Cabernet. So the cool thing about this, not to get too dorky, because a lot of this is like ultra dork.
No, get ultra dorky.
Well, so it's
we need that. We're gonna have a lot of fun.
All right.
But there's some people who like they want who were like they're tuning in for like a quick lesson on German. So go for it.
Oh God. Well, man, how many hours is this again? Good Lord. So this is a Cabernet, but it's from 1968. So the genre, the product cut that we know of and we see a lot in stores these days, Cabernet, which is this kind of light off dry wine.
Yeah.
Its historical kind of founding were the most special wines that were literally held in the cabinet, like in the safe part of the cellar.
Okay.
They would be in, and it was normally spelled with a C, and it was kind of like the the treasure chest. So the great wines would be the cabinets. They weren't the least expensive. They were in fact the greatest. So this is a cabinet. Curiously, it's spelled with a K.
Yeah.
But it is in 1968, which is before the wine law created this. So it is a cabinet in theory, this is a very special wine in the cellar and has no relationship to the cabinet that we know today.
Oh,
So you can find old bottles of German wine that will say Auslese cabinet. So it means Auslese, like the special Auslese, right?
yeah.
So this is that.
So let's do this before we get into like your backstory, because break down German wines, like the levels. So you got cabinet, Trocken. I mean, break it down for everybody, please.
Yeah.
real quick.
Okay. So I'll preface this with the beginning that things are really complicated right now in German wine because they're transitioning. They've been transitioning for about 5 or 6 decades, so it never ends. But basically, you have dry wines. So most, I would say, if you go and you see a Riesling that says Trocken, that means it's dry. Trocken is the German word for dry. But there are a lot of wines too that just don't say anything. They'll just say Gobbledygook in German and Riesling, and they don't say anything. I would bet 99% of the time, if the wine does not say Cabinet, Spätlese, Auslese, either of those 3 words, and it just says Gobbledygook word and then Riesling, it's probably dry. So there's a huge movement now going to not having to articulate the fact the wine is dry. We're only going to articulate it if the wine is not dry, right? So you're going to see more and more what I call kind of the new school of German wines. It'll just have a word, probably the vineyard site. Let's say it says Ellergrube or Sonnenur or Himmelreich or one of these very Germanic and kind of cool sounding words. And if it doesn't say anything else, it's probably dry. The other thing it can have is a little GG, means grosses Gewächs. That's the Grand Cru dries. That way you also know it's dry. A little trick of the trade is to look at the alcohol. So in other words, if the wine is 12 or 12.5 or 13, the higher the alcohol, the more sugar that's been fermented, the more likely it's dry. So you can almost always, if the wine is 12%, even 11.5 in certain cases, but 12% or higher, it's dry. So that covers a little bit the dry thing. And then from there, really, it's Cabinet, Spätlese, Auslese. And those are what they called the Prädikats. And these, as I said, were invented in 71. And they refer a little bit to historical practices that have been going on. So at the bottom of the hierarchy is the Cabinet. This is the wine that's the lightest, the freshest. It will have a little bit of residual sugar. It will definitely be off dry, but it should be super light, really high in acid, like super zingy. And not to get too dorky about it, but like it almost will taste dry. Like the acid will be so extreme that once you get past the fruit,
Right, the initial fruit.
yes, it will end almost bitter sometimes.
Yeah.
That is a Cabinet, and that was completely invented in 1971. They just wanted these sort of wines existed clearly, but they just gave that name Cabinet because the Cabinet kind of, before we were talking, sort of meant reserve. So it was almost like they co-opted the reserve for the cheapest one just to make them, easier to sell.
As they do here.
As they do, exactly.
Look
Exactly.
at that private reserve wine for $6.99.
Exactly.
Wow, must be good.
Man, it's a reserve and it's private.
Exactly.
But somehow I can get it at this big bottle retail store. Crazy.
That's amazing.
So that was Cabinet. Then when you go above that, you go to Spätlese. And this is where it gets interesting and or dorky and or both, is that Spätlese is just a practice. It literally means harvesting late.
Yeah.
And so Spätleses were not a category. They were just a methodology, right? It's like we're going to harvest late and we're probably going to get a little botrytis. And so the wine's going to be a little sweet and a little kind of brown and blah, blah, blah. And so that was Spätlese. And so with the 71 wine law, they officially codified it, meaning it had to be this ripe. And at the end of the day, as things happen, now it really has no reference to practice. You can pick Spätleses early in the year, you can do whatever, but that's where it comes from. And then Auslese is the ripest category. So with each level, we're getting a little sweeter, a little richer, right? We're going from skim milk to whole milk sort of dig. So Auslese means to harvest out. Lese is the German word for harvest, so it's to harvest out. And so this is literally they're taking berries out of the clusters and picking ones that have a little more botrytis or a little overripe, and they're making these more unctuous dessert wines, right? So I think for the modern palate, Auslese is kind of where the dessert wine picks up.
Right.
But Spätlese will be sweet. So a lot of people, at this point, as palates get drier and drier, and that becomes kind of a bit of a fad, more and more Spätlese are like, whoa, a little too sweet. And Cabinet right now, I think from at least the fashion standpoint, Cabinet has that nice balance because they're dryish, they're so angelic, but they have great acidity. So, the pendulum of fashion, man, swings back and forth. It's like skinny jeans and bell bottoms, and right now we're...
I never wore no skinny jeans. I can't do it.
But bell bottoms? That means you wore bell bottoms.
I didn't even wear bell bottoms. I missed the bell bottoms.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I had girlfriends who wore them because Janet brought them back in '90 and That's the Way Love Goes video. So and what was it? Delight, that group Delight, Miss Lady Keir wearing it. But anyway, well, cool. That was a quick little. We'll dive into some more stuff there. Thanks for that. So man, let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? Where are you from?
So I grew up in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a bizarre kind of biography, but my father's Austrian, so my father was born in Vienna.
Oh, wow.
And then he moved in the late 50s. The family went to South America. So he grew up in Caracas. My mother's from an old school Irish Catholic family in Detroit. So she was the youngest of 5. And I think her one goal in graduating, she was the first to go to college. She graduated. And everyone, old school, like, Irish family, everyone lived within a quarter of a mile.
Yep.
And they all had a lot of children young. And my mom looked at a map and just got the job furthest away. And so she she loves her family, for anyone to say, but wanted a new experience. And so she flew to Caracas, to teach English. And so she went there. My brother and I were both born there. And then in the late 70s, early 80s, we moved back to the U.S. And my dad got a job in working, like, doing advertising for a steel mill, and, like, completely arbitrarily landed in Pittsburgh.
Wow.
That's not what you're expecting, huh?
No, but that's why I asked that question.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. So basically you at one point you got a Venezuelan passport.
I do.
Yeah.
I have citizenship.
Yeah. Wow, that's bananas.
Not as useful as you think.
Yeah, no, not nowadays.
No.
Not so much.
Curiously, I cannot get German or Austrian citizenship.
Really?
Yes.
Even though your father is Austrian. And he was born there, right?
He was born in Austria, but during the Anschluss. So my father was born in 41.
Okay.
So it was part of the German Empire, the Nazi Empire.
Yes.
And so he was a German citizen. And then they left in the 50s, so they weren't running from anything. There was just no work. Vienna was bombed out. There was no work to be had, so they heard there was work in Brazil. They went to Brazil. There was no work in Brazil. They went to Venezuela. My grandfather hated it. My grandfather was, like, very old school European in all the cliched ways. Like, he had coffee. Kaffee und Kuchen is a thing in, like, old school Germany. At 3 o'clock, you have something sweet and a cup of coffee, and, like, that's it, man. Like, it isn't the case anymore, but even growing up, we'd go there 3 o'clock. Everything closes. Everyone goes for coffee and kuchen.
So dope.
My grandfather
used to know how to live,
dude,
man.
I mean, for real, right?
They used to know how to live, man.
And so he would do that, and so he went to Venezuela and, like, couldn't learn Spanish. It just, like, he felt like a fish out of water. So within 6 months, he was gone. So that my grandmother and grandfather got divorced. My grandfather then went back to Vienna, blah, blah, blah. And my grandmother loved it. She was like, woo, she liked the weather, everything, man. She was super happy there. And my father grew up there and really, really liked it too. But basically, my father then is living in Venezuela and is to some extent a Venezuelan. He always said he sort of felt out of place everywhere, to be honest. But it was a huge thing for him, and really where he grew up. He identified, I think, more with that than with Europe. And so his company, it's very similar to what was happening here, is not to get too political, but as things were getting more nationalist in Venezuela, they were like, well, we don't want that many Europeans. The fewer Europeans we're hiring, the more Venezuelans is better. So my father, and he honestly didn't give a fuck, I don't think. So he, like, reneged on his German citizenship, became a Venezuelan citizen 6 months before I was born. So when I was born, my father was not a German citizen, and there's just, like, no way. So that's it.
Well, that's crazy. I mean, like, because I know, like, if you're Irish,
I know,
and, like, your grandparents are from Ireland,
I might be able to get it through that.
There's like you can get citizenship.
But it's my father was born in Vienna.
Yeah.
All my cousins are still in Vienna. My entire family is all in Vienna, and then the other half is all in Detroit. It's really bizarre.
Well, I mean, it's beginning to, make sense. Your fascination with history and things like that, because like, that's a time in the world, like, people didn't travel and live in other countries. Like, your family is in an elite space and doing that, going across continents, and that's gonna inform a lot.
Yeah, but honestly, it was just the elite part was not there.
No, but I mean elite, and like not like just that they traveled, not they were wealthy, like people. I mean, shit, people in America still don't even freaking travel.
Dude,
to Europe,
it's amazing,
right? You know what I'm saying? So
when I think about my father and what he went in that generation. So my father was born in 41. He says he remembers kind of, like, playing in the rubble of Vienna, and, like, they would, like, tanks blown up, and they'd, like, make toys out of them. And then they went to Italy. tried to get work there, and they took a steamship, and they hear these stories, man. The steamship, and they had like those rooms in the belly with no windows, and there was like a huge storm. And my father this is mid-50s, so he's like 14, like old enough to remember this shit, right? And just like in this ship vomiting all over because they're in some huge storm and they can't, like, no one's allowed to go out, and they're sort of in the steerage, right? As it were, and it's just like, that's it. And then you get to Venezuela, you get to Brazil first, and they don't really speak any Spanish. Man,
and that's
the shit they went through,
like that's what I'm saying. Dude, like they went to Brazil. Like,
it's really
in the 50s.
It's really intense,
from Vienna, right? Yeah. And then that's all. I mean, like, to find work.
Yeah. It's intense. And my father then, picked up Spanish as you do when you're 15, right? I mean, you have to. That's it. Yeah. So he spoke fluent. My father was very much an autodidact. He graduated high school, but he did not go to university. But he was just like a brilliant kind of thinker person who clearly I have not inherited it because I just use the phrase thinker person. But he was very smart, perfectly fluent in German, Spanish. English was his third language. He spoke it probably better than I do. And he was just one of those guys that, like, picked up everything. Even when computers came around, my father, like, in the end of he had a relatively, like, unsuccessful marketing career, mostly because he just, like, didn't put up with anyone's bullshit.
Yeah.
But he was so into computers and taught himself everything. And we were the one family where, like, the young kids would go to Dad to be like, Dad, how does this computer? Like, he knew it all up to the day he died. Like, he was my tech guy. He helped me design the Vom Boden website.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was
amazing.
And I meanwhile can barely, like, sharpen a pencil. So I did not inherit that technological side.
So what was Pittsburgh like? Because Pittsburgh's like now this hipster city.
Yeah.
Which great food scene, great food and wine scene. Like, what was it like back then when you were?
Pittsburgh is like had a bit of a chip on its shoulder, and we grew up just outside of Pittsburgh, and it was like a middle class suburban kind of upbringing that was honestly like, here's the honest truth. I can't say anything bad about it because it was like, I don't know, I rode my bike and there were trees and like I had good friends and but there's also I got out of there as soon as I could. I don't think anything, nothing that Pittsburgh did, but more that just, there's an American thing. This is interesting compared to Europe, and maybe this is part of the wine fascination. I've thought about this quite a bit. Like, we talk about terroir, right? And wines come from a place. But man, with people, we have that too, I think.
Yeah.
And the American psychology is always to move, to like find your own world, right? To get out there. And both my brother left and went to California, and I went to New York. And I wasn't conscious at the time of like, but I never would have stayed in Pittsburgh. I just wouldn't have. I don't know. To prove something to myself or to
it is.
I don't know, right?
Yeah, it's like that manifest destiny.
Yeah, and with the Europeans, like, most of my growers,
our family's been here for 800 years.
Yeah, and like in a creepy way, they take over the bedrooms that their parents were in, right?
Yeah,
the parents move, and there is this just like unquestioned connection to the land, which I do think, certainly unconsciously before I was conscious of it, I'm extraordinarily envious of.
No, I agree.
To have like, even moving out of like New York, when I finally moved to New Jersey, to have like a little crappy piece of land I could put my fingers in the dirt after 20 some years of renting was like kind of an experience. It was like, fuck, man, like just to have something, it was meaningful. And I think about, families that go back, like you said, 800 years. It's like, wow, that's crazy.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. It's we had what was it? What was super handsome Italian guy's name?
That could be any number of Italians.
Scavino. Yeah. Yeah, Scavino.
I like
Luigi Scavino, his son, who's Paolo's his uncle, but and he was saying they live in like Barolo. He's like, it's so small. Everybody. He's like, it's 300 people. Everybody's my cousin.
Yeah.
And I mean, he travels in New York, but like he's like you said, like when you talk about they have a sense of place, and we don't have that here, So, so was there wine on the table growing up in your house?
Yeah, there was. So it's funny, like people oftentimes like,
Lorenzo, by the way, just
Lorenzo,
I was on the top of producers looking up. She's bothering. Sorry, man. So
no.
so there was wine on the table.
There was, but it's not what you think, right? People are like, oh, your dad is Austrian, so that's why you're, to Riesling. It's like, no. My father, like I said, was more South American than he was European, and so he liked big red wines. And my father was also very practical, and so he he would always have, like, if we had wine, it was the $9.99 or like $7.99 liter of Australian wine. And when I got very into wine, you know, he'd taste my stuff and he'd be like, meh, like, I don't like it. And then he'd put this down and be like, why is this better? And I'm like, man, it's not better. Like, it's just different, right? Wine is just like art, you know?
Yep.
Your kid's drawing is not necessarily worse than a Picasso. It's just different, and there's reasons we value this shit. And some of it has meaning, and other parts don't. So I never had any. So we grew up with wine. It was definitely a part of it. There's an Austrian tradition called a Heurigen, which is this, like, it's usually little farms that, like, they have some grapes and they make a little wine, but then they have a restaurant too, and they make fresh wine. You go there and you just it's like a beer garden sort of vibe, right? You drink a lot of wine, but it's not really about the wine. It's about getting drunk and eating a bunch. And so it's, you know, it's convivial. It was always a part of, like, how people got together, but there was no like, you know, erudite kind of study of wine in my house, for sure not. It was more just like wine. And if they didn't have wine, it'd be beer. And if they didn't have beer, it'd be cocktails. And, like, that was it. You know, there was always alcohol on the table. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. What kind of food because your mom was Irish, what kind of food did she
Yeah,
just
I mean,
like,
honestly, she made more South American food, like carne
Okay.
machada,
Wow.
a lot of beans and rice, a lot of shredded meats and pork. We had yuca growing up, which I think now you get. Do you know yuca?
Well,
It's
of
like
course.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I do now, but I
Yeah.
didn't know yucca until I was like in like 20 or so.
Dude, it's
because I friends were from Costa Rica. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I would not have. So that's like in the early 90s. Like, but now you can go to any hip restaurant and
Yeah.
have yucca fries
80,
or whatever.
like 80. I mean, yeah, early 80s to like the entire 80s, we had yucca. at the
yes,
house.
that's uncommon.
And you had to go. It was interesting too. So like I said, I had cancer growing up, and so I was in the hospital a lot. And I still remember from the children's hospital, there was like I think it was a Vietnamese kind of grocery store, and they had it, and it was like the only place in Pittsburgh. And so it'd always be like, I'd go get treatments, and my mom would be like, all right, then we'll get yucca after. And I'd be like, awesome. That was it. Like, they're so intertwined in my head of, like, going to the
Wow.
hospital and then getting yucca and, like, yeah. So more than that, she then later learned a good amount of German cooking, but more from my grandmother. My grandfather, my father, I think, if you were like what's his final meal,
Yep.
he would definitely do something like carne machada. It wouldn't be like potato dumplings.
Wow.
Again, it was more, you know,
Yeah.
your formative years. He
Yeah,
left
yeah.
when he was like, whatever, 10, 15. Like, those are the years you associate more with food, you know?
So growing up, I mean, like you mentioned, like you had leukemia. Like how do you deal with that as a youth?
You don't. You know, you deal with it in your teens. That's when, unfortunately, you deal with it. So, like, yeah, I had it 4 to 14, basically. I had 4 to, like, 6. You'd have to ask my mom a lot of this I've, like, put away.
Yeah, of course.
But, like, I had a bad remission and then went through it again. And, like, the second time you go through it, they're like, they fuck you up, right? It's like the first time it's like, well, you know, we'll give you these drugs and blah, blah, blah. And then when you get it again, they're like, all right, now we nuke you.
Yeah.
So I got nuked, and it was, man, it's weird. But as a kid, you're just like, I just want to ride my bike. I don't
mean,
care,
yeah,
you know?
It's probably better to go through that as
Probably,
because you
probably.
just the consciousness of.
The bad, like losing your hair.
But
is
yeah,
like,
that must have been like gnarly.
That's really embarrassing.
Because kids are just not understanding.
Dude, I still remember this like girl on the bus. Like I'd buzzed my hair before because it was starting to fall out in patches, and you know, I'm just sitting there. I'm like hoping no one notices me, and I'm just and she like is sitting behind me, and she leans over and she's like, I know you lost your hair because you have leukemia. And that's all she said. And I was just
yeah, great.
But fucking
Thanks.
devastating, you know?
What the fuck is that?
But it's like one of these things you live in your little world. You're
I
like,
know.
no one's noticing,
Right.
no, and you know, and just
Everybody
pointing
noticed.
it out.
Yeah,
it's
thanks.
like devastating. But yeah, I mean, I think to some extent, honestly, the most formative thing in my, not even I think, I believe it was the most formative thing for me. It's what taught me everything. It's why I came to New York. It's why I tried the art thing. It's why I decided
it would
to
make you appreciate.
You're just like, man, I don't know. It's that life is worth living, and you know, and it probably makes you a bit more of a risk taker than if you did not.
Well, yeah.
That's
So, where did you go to college?
Penn State.
Wow.
Yes.
So Penn State.
Here's how
Nittany Lion.
Oh God. Here's how it went down. I was like, because I, you know, how I'm dealing with leukemia is like
Exactly.
at this age. So I'm like, fuck no, I'm not going to college. Like, I just don't care about it.
Right.
I don't do a bunch of drugs and write the great American novel.
Exactly. I'm gonna be Hunter S.
Yep,
Thompson or
exactly.
something.
Yes. And my parents were like, yes, you are, and you're paying for it. And I was like, fuck. So I got into Penn State, and it was like $1,200 a semester. And I was like, whatever. Okay. And honestly, I could have said no, but I didn't. I also, I had a lot of plans of what I wasn't going to do.
Yep.
But I didn't have any plans of what I was going to do.
Yeah.
So I was like, when they were insistent, I was like, okay. And so I went to Penn State, and Penn State is right. It's 40,000 people. It's
a whole city.
It's a whole city.
Yeah.
And there's a T-shirt that's like something like "We're a sports town with a school."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Not like we're a school with a sport.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was not into sports. Like, this was my dark period, right? Like wearing a lot of black and just not. I never had mascara, but
period. Yeah.
but I was definitely that vibe. I never went to one football game. I sold all my tickets for good amounts of money.
I know, like Penn State athlete. Like you said, it's like.
And I worked in cafes and booked all the cliched shit.
Wow.
And was super alienated, honestly, had no friends. And then I met my professor, so an art history professor of Dutch Renaissance art, Claudia Swan, who's a professor at the University of St. Louis now, who was honestly saved me. Was became my best friend. I just saw her 2 weeks ago. We're still in touch.
Amazing.
And she was without her and without that connection to something bigger than my own complaining about my own life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Would have been a worse artist. I don't know. Who knows what would have happened? But that's what I was talking about earlier. That was the moment I was like, "Fuck, okay." I care about something other than negating everyone else, right?
Yeah.
And that was my access. So Penn State, I have to say, loved it. Claudia and I would just drink 40s and hang out. Just seriously. There's not many. My kids, I introduced them recently to her, and they're like, "Is it normal for you to be best friends with your college professor?" And I was like, I don't think so, but everyone has their own path.
Exactly.
It's all good.
Yeah, no, I'm still really good friends with one of my law school professors. I was a researcher, and but that's not common.
Yeah.
And so was hers like an introductory class, and then you liked it, and then you kind of latched on?
Exactly.
Because
yeah.
Yeah.
And I had my father was, like I said, the autodidact. My father could kind of do anything. He played 16 different musical instruments, never having had any classes in it. He could draw incredibly well. He was super good at engineering and all this kind of weird, thinky stuff. And so I got at least the drawing part from him.
Mm-hmm.
And so always art was a very strong part of my identity, right? But I'm too middle class, kind of bourgeois, where it's that's not an artist isn't really what you can do. So the art history was this is something respectable.
Right,
you get a job
you
doing
can
art.
become a professor,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But middle class, you're nobody's
I
feeling
mean,
you to be an artist.
No, and and I grew up in Pittsburgh and was certainly very aware of Warhol, and the kind of artistic world there. Carnegie has a huge museum there, so it was a big part of my upbringing was going to the Carnegie, seeing, but those.
And you said it right, by the way. People,
What's that?
It's Carnegie.
Carnegie, yeah.
Yeah, people go Carnegie.
Carnegie.
It's Carnegie. Yeah.
He so that was a huge part of it, and but it just wasn't practical. So the art history, it was you had to do, art history, blah blah blah, like a general class, and that was kind of the hook where I was like, fuck, that's cool. Yeah. That's interesting.
Totally. So, when did you intern at the Art Institute of Chicago?
So that was right after, and this was when. So I do my 3 years. My 3 years undergrad, 4 years I guess, but 3 years as an art history guy. Graduate, and then I through Claudia, I get introductions and kind of opening up the world of various things to do after. I knew I didn't want to go right to grad school, one because I couldn't afford it. So I'm I'll take a year off. I'm gonna work a bit, kind of get prepped. And then, and kind of weigh the options. And so it was basically once I figured it out, there was this there was an internship at the Art Institute of Chicago. They had a really good collection of Gerhard Richter and a bunch of other artists I was very interested in. It just kind of made sense. And honestly, I applied for it and never really thought I would get it. And obviously at that age, you're of course I'll get it.
Right. Catch-22, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I got it. And it was a paid internship. It was amazing.
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh, dude. So I went to Chicago 3 months. It was really my first time just kind of living as an adult, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had some really tiny kind of dirty apartment in the Ukrainian village. And it was just such a beautiful formative time. And then I kind of during that summer figured out I wanted to go to New York. And so basically, spent the kind of winter trying to figure out how the hell to get to New York. I had no friends here, no access, no knowledge, but I wanted to go to Columbia and I knew a professor and I was I'll just fucking make it happen. And that's it. So I moved to New York and just, I don't know, my first place, I was thinking about it as I was walking here, was 29th Street and 6th Avenue. And I rented a room from this old lady who was just kind of like, it was such a great initial experience in New York. You know, it's like I knew enough about New York, but didn't really know anything.
Yeah.
And she was like one of the first generation women to go through Columbia journalist school.
Oh, wow.
And she was just like a New York intellectual, political minded, like just activist. I mean, she was and crazy as the day is long. So I was doing like, I was waiting on tables. I was doing research for a writer. I was doing like anything to pay the bills, basically.
Yeah, I read that. Like you had like the
dude,
classic move to New York. Like you had 3 jobs.
Yeah, dude, it was nuts.
So yeah, walk everybody through that story.
She would come home and I'd be like at 5 o'clock, like I'd be finishing up my day job. Like I would go to the library and do research, and I'd be getting ready to go to the restaurant I worked at. And she'd come home like 5 o'clock, have a fucking gallon of vodka, and she smoked fucking constantly. And she'd just like sit down, pour a huge thing of vodka straight up out of a plastic gallon jug, light a cigarette, and then she'd look at me as I was kind of getting ready to go and just like to fuck with me. Like she would just try to get me in fights about anything. This was 98 or so like the Clinton impeachment things were going on.
Okay.
And I just to play devil's advocate, I always kind of try and find a center. I was like, I don't know, I guess he lied under oath. That's bad. And she just like would vomit anger at me about like, wow, the conservatives and Clinton's done more for blah, 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 blah. And it was just like, it was my first experience of being like yelled at by brilliant, crazy people in a way that was like awesome. I was like, I love New York. Like you just have people are so opinionated and like in your face. And not in like she wanted me to fight back, you know? It wasn't like she just wanted that like sparring, right? I loved it. I was like, man, I'm home.
That's awesome.
It was great. I still think about her a lot.
So, you're like working 3 jobs, studying, making art. How did you come to enter the wine business?
The short story is that I was doing
short stories.
Yeah, all right. So I'm at this point, like I'm starting to sell work.
Okay.
So I'm doing these big drawings of rabbits. I'm like, I'm starting to sell. A few people are like, well, I'll take a rabbit. And I'm like, okay. So I start selling a little bit of work, and then I get a gallery in New York. So I have a gallery, and like I'm in the best year possible. I'm selling enough work to like barely survive, right? So I'm always supplementing with other crap. So it's not success in like a like hang by the infinity pool. So like I'm starting to sell shit, and then it's more and more studio time because and being a writer or a visual artist is unless you're choreographing with other people, it's a pretty solitary, lonely thing, right?
Right.
And so my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was just like, man, you're in the studio, you're just like, you're getting a little kooky because you're just like alone all the time in your head and blah, blah. And being an artist is a very difficult thing because you either have so much, you kind of have to have so much confidence to keep doing this, and then it always bottoms out and you're like, this is, staring at the same drawing. In 1 minute you're like, I'm a genius, this is going to change the world. And then 10 minutes you're later like, I'm such a failure, this is horrible, right? And it's just this continuous oscillation. And so she just said, listen, get the fuck out of the studio, man. Like for a few hours a day, go do something. And like, what else do you like? And I was like, man, I don't really like or know anything. And she's like, you drink a lot? I was like, that's true. I did drink a lot of wine. I'd gotten very into wine in the last, call it 5 years. So coming in New York, you're working in restaurants, you're exposed to a lot of things, right?
So
this was honestly the first time that it was beyond the $9 liter, right? Of like Australian Shiraz that my dad would drink. Right. And so it was cool. It's like, what the fuck is Chateau Neuf? Never like 13. It's just this whole book opening. You're like, that's insane. So she was like, and I actually knew a decent amount about wine and already had a little bit of like things. I knew enough to know what I liked. So I like German wines. I like Barolo. I like Burgundy. I liked the things that I liked. And so she was like, get a job. And I happened to read in a Wine Spectator about Crush. Literally, that was it. I was like, I don't know, like, wine, this store's opening. I should go there. And so I went there and got hired. And that was kind of it. And I remember showing up the first day, very proud. Like, I don't know. I bought like a shirt with a collar. And I stroll in and I'm like, all right, like, I don't know, what is the wine business? Like, I assume I'll stand on the floor and just sell like, like expensive Sancerres and like some Burgundies to like very wealthy people coming in and like probably, I'm flying their private jets next week. And the guy looks at me, he's like, all right, so like head back to the stock room, start breaking down the boxes. And I was like, "Ah," and I called my girlfriend. I was like, I think I'm a stock boy. And she was so sweet. I was 29 maybe, and she was like, I think I'm a 30-year-old stock boy. And she's like, sweetie, that's okay. That's okay. You'll be a great stock boy. And I was like, I will.
Exactly.
I'm gonna break
You're the
down this
best.
cardboard.
Wait, do you see how I break down boxes?
Oh my God, that was my first lesson of the wine business. Is really should be called the cardboard business, because it is all about taking things out of cardboard and then putting them back into cardboard at some point. That is,
Ooh,
it is the
I like
cardboard
that.
job. You pull things out of cardboard,
Yep.
and eventually you might hold it, you might drink it,
Right.
but eventually you put it back into cardboard.
And a store like Crush, yeah, like you were talking case buy, so it's going back.
Lots of it, yeah. It's
I've never heard it that way, but also this humility. Like I think we live in an era where people want things now, and like that you take a course online or in person, and you get a credential, and you like, okay, I know about, I'm going to go sell wine, and it's not that way.
yeah, the reality of it is different for sure.
And I think people need to understand you need to be in this. I mean, you're in a good spot. I mean, at that point, because it was just to get out the house and the Zen you're breaking down. Like my thing, I don't mind doing that stuff, but I don't like bouncing. Like if I'll break down boxes all day, but don't pull me off it, because I just get zen about it. You know what I mean? But I do like your attitude. You're like, I'm gonna be the best, because I think we need more of that. Because.
And I think too, honestly, I agree with you. Like the physicality of it, and to this day, is still, I don't call in as many accounts, but even. I mean, when I do, I like that. Like, I don't want to sit. At this point, I do deal more like in front of computers and spreadsheets and that shit. But man, when I get out and walk and like sweat a little bit, and you have fucking half a case of wine on your back, and you're late for an appointment, and like, do I take the A or do I like take the C? Like, you're computing all the various routes on the subway, like how you can get to the place. You're like, do I think I take the third car back? Because at West 4th Street, I'll be, I love that shit, man. I love just the physicality. I liked waiting on tables. I worked in cafes. I was a pizza delivery boy. I've washed dishes in the finest establishments, from Pittsburgh to State College to New York. Like, I like that sweating a little bit, hurting a bit.
Yep.
Is
for sure.
A good mental treatment for.
You know what, Stephen? It's
sanity.
time for a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more about how you got started in the wine business. Okay, cool. We're back. So they said, okay, here's a box cutter. Get in the back, Skippy. But while you were at Crush, you came up with an e-marketing idea for the wines. What was that?
I mean, so I have to say that I was a big part of that program, but it wasn't like, I was like, I think email will be important. All this stuff, what you're saying earlier too about like, kind of putting your shoulder down and working, that for sure is a part of it. Yeah. But I also look back and I can't deny that like it was a lot of it too, man, is just fucking luck. That's the part that I like about life, where you look, people ask me for advice. It's like, man, I don't know. Like if I got very lucky, I do think, and I worked for it, but it's always 50-50 at best.
Yep.
And like around 2000, I started at Crush, I think in 2005 when it opened. And it was just the last of like, internet marketing and email marketing was coming up. The collector, I explain, man, time is moving so quickly. And I tell people about it. I sold the 2005 Burgundies. 2005, greatest vintage ever. Another one of those vintages.
Right.
But still, I sat in the back as I like got past the stock boy thing, because it's stock boy for a good 6 months, and then it's like I could have some shifts on the floor, and then it becomes apparent you know some things and you should try this, and then you do it and you're semi-successful. So you kind of quickly, if you can, they were very good, I would say, at like recognizing talent. And they let you kind of do whatever the fuck you wanted. Like if you make money, you can go do it, right? Yeah. And so, I'd sit in there and call people up and just like try and sell them Burgundy. And this is 100% truth. Fourier Griot and Clos Saint Jacques are now two of like the most, illustrious Burgundies. And I would call people up in 2005 and just be like, all right, I got a package for you. I'll give you like one Griot, and that's probably going to be like $280 bucks. I don't know, maybe it was less at the time. Now I don't even know what it trades for. Right. Many thousands, I would assume, or at least in four figures. And people would just be like, like, all right, I'll do that. And I'd be like, all right. And like a Clos Saint Jacques, which is considered one of the Grand Crus, even though it's Premier Cru, very like desirable bottle now. But like you would have to, they'd be like, please, like if I'm giving you a Griot, take a Clos Saint Jacques, like take some Village level. You really had to like, you had to sell it, and people were like, right, I'll take one of those. They were stamp collectors, right? Yep. They were like, I mean this in the absolute greatest term. They were just dorks who love the shit and they love to kind of bargain and finagle with you, right? And you'd be like, all right, take 1 Griot, 2 Clos Saint Jacques, but then you have to take 6 Oeschazot, and they'd be like, I'll take, and it was just this like horse trading shit that was fun, but it was work, right? It was definitely work. So it was just it was when things were beginning, right? And 5 years later, that was not the situation, but in '05 it was. And so with the email thing, it's same thing. It was not my idea, but I was probably one of like 18 students who went to Penn State and did a lot of writing. Penn State at the time, my brother went there too and studied business, and it was a lot of like, you have 60,000 kids there. Like it's a lot of like fill out the dot sort of things, right? The scanners. Multiple choice was big. But in art history, you had to write. There were little blue books. You bought them for 50 cents. You had to write and turn in your blue book. And so I did a lot of writing. And I don't think I'm like great at writing, but I've worked at it. And so like, they would put together an email. And at the time, this is kind of the end of Parker's wild influence, right? And again, I was not the person who made this decision. I supported it, and then I challenged it in other times. But we're not going to sell. Everyone was selling like the $9.99 Shiraz with 99 points, right? It was always points. And we made the decision we're not going to use points, and we're just going to tell the story about some of this dorkier shit. And it was the amount of effort we put into those emails. We would have little sidebars that would be like, here's where Montepulciano d'Abruzzo is, and here's why you should care. And there was so much work to these things. And they did. They caused a little bit of. It was just a new way of doing it. And again, it wasn't just me. It was 3 or 4 really passionate wine dorks. One of who you've had on the show as well, Lyle Fass, was there at the time too. And like we just did this shit, and it's not like it changed the world immediately, but I do think it kind of set the standard for what the smarter stores and restaurants or how they talk about wine and how they present it, right? It was talk about the culture, talk about the history, talk about where it comes from and what like the person who makes the wine looks like and what it feels like to fall in the vineyard, right? As opposed to like silky tannins and 98 points, right?
Yeah.
And that changed a lot, and I think it set the store and myself a little bit on a trajectory because I could write.
Yeah. Well, people buy things from people they know, like, and trust, and how you do that is stories.
Yeah,
you connect through stories. Like that's and now that's all you see. I'm like on so many lists I have to get off them just because I get bombarded.
Yeah.
But I like to see how people are writing about wines and they're nowadays. There's places I get 2 emails a day, 2 offers a day.
I know.
Boom, I'm on text lists.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that's like the way to. And I tell people, if you're not selling wine that way, you're gonna get left behind because like it started, like you said, like in the early 00s with people emailing people. So like, come on board. It's not a fad. It's 2022.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
It's been around, and it's just and people are getting more prolific at it. But and also like you said about Lyle, it's also interesting that there are just like stores. There's like iconic stores that people come out of that do things. Crush is a newer one, but you have you have your Morel. You got places like Acker. There's places like if you work there, you can write your own. And if you work there, you can write your own ticket. And it's just interesting to see these camps. So. How long did you work at Crush? How long did you stay at Crush?
So I was there so I started in 05 and left in 13, the end of 12. Yeah. 13 or so is when, I think that's correct. Yeah, is when like I started with Vom Boden basically.
Okay, so started with Vom Boden was, did you create Vom Boden?
Yeah, that's what I guess when I started. Yeah.
I mean, that's cool. So like, what was going on to make you make the jump from retailer to importer? And before you answer that, this 1968 cabinet is so fresh and the acid, and it's just beautiful, amazing.
Yeah, we should talk like because old wines, everyone thinks you open them and drink them quick because they're gonna die. But in certainly some reds, maybe that happens. The fruit gets a little like kind of madderized feeling. But with old Riesling, I don't know chemistry. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I drink a lot. And they almost always get better. Even day 2, if you don't fuck with them, like, put them in the fridge, put a cork in them, like day 2, they're just like, wow, I don't know what it is. Maybe it is just the sulfur. I don't think so. But like, man, they have energy. They have energy.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, like
So the Vom Boden thing.
sales to importer,
Yeah.
man. That's like, yeah.
Here's how it goes down, and I know why. Like, I don't know how, and there's years of my life because I had like my first kid at the same time, and like we moved, and like there's definitely months I don't remember, but it basically was this. There's two highs. There's a lot of highs. One of the highs is knowing like the kind of high-end wine world and like making the sale, right? Making the connection, putting the case of DRC in someone's hands, getting the rare Magnum, doing that thing. And like, I had some big sales and like where you just be like, holy hell, right? It's like someone just bought, whatever, a case of wine that's like more than I'm gonna make this year. And it's like there's an adrenaline rush, and that's real,
for
right?
sure.
It could be with wine, it could be with cars, it could be with real estate, whatever. There's that.
I think wine's different because and especially if they're gonna drink some of it too. They're not even gonna flip it. You're like, damn, they're gonna drink it. Like you could tell who's gonna sell it, but like we're like, damn, that's disposable.
Yeah. My parents, when I first moved to New York, and they like, my father spent the last 20 years in Pittsburgh, died in Pittsburgh, and like, I'd go back and be like, like, so you work in a liquor store? I'm like, well, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I mean, not to like, put lipstick on a pig, like, yeah, but at the same time, we're definitely like selling to high, be like, I sold people who spend 6 figures a year on wine. They're just like, mic drop, like, what? Yeah. They're like, again, it's like Pittsburgh people don't do that, or like they didn't, maybe they do now, I don't know, but it was a whole different world, right?
Right.
And so going back to that, there's people who get a real high off that, and I enjoyed it. I'm not going to say that like, blah, blah. But then I started traveling to Europe. I started going to Germany. And it was always just, to be perfectly honest, like the Burgundy trips and the Champagne trips were like, there are other people who knew it better, did it better, and deserved it more, and they went on those.
Sure.
And you just go down paths, and more with the German wines. I was like, fuck, man, they're so good. They're so under. And I was also like, for the most part, broke, right? So it's like, if people are opening really expensive champagne, please invite me and I will drink it. Right. No problem.
Right.
But if I have to if I want to get deep into something, I can afford it. I can't afford it. I still can't, right? But German wine, man, for $40 at the time, $25, you could get the best of the best, and you could open them and experience them, and there was access, and it was like, fuck. So I started going to Europe, and then I realized that place thing, right? It was so clear to me at an unconscious level that I liked. My real high was being with the winemakers in the vineyards, and it still is. I've been traveling to Germany now for 15 years. I've seen the same people 100 times, and it is still every fucking bit as thrilling as it was the first time. And I go into Schoenfels with Florian Lauer. I go into Palmberg with Uli Stein, and I'm just like, I'm not a spiritual person, but there is something where I'm like, fuck, I feel a certain connection to the universe that I don't anywhere else, and that's what I want. And the highs of selling expensive wine were great, but they're not the same, and I wanted to fucking spend time with winemakers and vineyards. And importing just seemed like a way to basically pay for that lifestyle, and that is what I did. And then, like I said before, it's luck. It's just dumb luck, and a little bit you have to have the courage to jump when you see the door open, but like if the door doesn't open, you jump, you hit the door, right? So there was an influential wine importer that just kind of decided to stop doing it, and in the interim, I'd become really good friends with a number of winemakers who are now, not canonical, but like Florian Lauer was relatively unknown. And I was one of the first people to really get behind him in the U.S. Uli Stein, same thing, for a certain very small percentage of the general audience. Like, these are very legendary producers. For 99.9% of people, never heard them. But in my little irrelevant world, they're very important. And they became good friends. And so when their importers stopped working, I just basically said, like, I know your wines. I fucking care too much, probably. I think I'm a pretty, like, reputable human. Like, I have integrity. And I know your wines. I can talk about them. I think I can sell them. That's like, I'm selling you on me right now. They're like, okay. I'm like, here's the other side. I've never actually imported anything, and I have no idea how to do that. And I don't have a company. But that, as far as I can tell, is the only downside. Do you know what I mean? All the other shit is great. I just have no idea what I'm doing, and I don't have a company and no money. And they're like, okay. So they weigh their options, and like, for reasons that the universe will explain to me at some point maybe, they said yes. So 4 growers it started with. It was Florian Lauer, Weiser Kunstler, Uli Stein, and Julian Hart. Those are 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that was it. And it just fucking jumped, man. I went for it.
I mean, because that's insane. Because, there was a time period when I was like, I want to import wines. Because, like, you're right. It's like, there's so much wine out there in the world. There's so much wine out there in the world, and you know, we have a big conglomeratization going on right now. You know, there's huge companies, and so like a lot of these small guys, they're just gonna be lost in a book, you know. And there's no one's gonna tell the story, right? Because you know, you got to eat, right? So like. But like German wines are so, like you said, I would say 99.999% of people don't know about them in the States.
For sure, yeah.
You know, I mean, what I remember about German wines when I started in '98 was Terry Thies, right? Yep. And he was, you know, and he also helped with microgrower champagne. But like what you're doing is, in the U.S. when we say boutique, we think like cult wine from California. That's real expensive, but like. It's boutique. This is small production. These are wines that you have to sell. You have to really kind of geek out to get. So how did you overcome the no money? I mean, that's my thing. Like, did you like, you know, because we had Adrian Chalk on. He had to mortgage his house because Lalu, you have to pay her.
Yeah, God.
You know, you have to pay her up front.
A few things I would say. One is that German wine is not, for the most part, is priced differently than Lalu, right? So it was a smaller ticket to entry.
Right.
But you know, when you have, at the time, I had one child. I think the second came along very soon thereafter. So here's the honest to God truth. I got a little bit of money from my in-laws. I genuinely don't know, but it was like 20 or 30 grand alone. Then I had some savings, probably about the same. But I also needed to live on that while I was building up, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And then I had bought at Crush a good amount of wine. And again, it was just good timing. It was just like, you know, you bought wine for whatever, $50, and it was worth $150 2 years later. So I sold a lot of my cellar to finance it.
Wow.
And a lot of it was just kind of eating shit for a bit, right? It's like the first few years, and my wife works and makes decent money. So, you know, it's a team, right? There's a lot, these things of like, I'd start them from my own work. But it's like, to not disrespect the amount of work, because there were certainly nights where I would like work all day at Crush, and when I was starting it, I'd get home at like, you know, 6, 7, 8 o'clock. Then I'd like, you know, whatever, take over with Henry, my son at the time, and kind of try and help out. And then from 9 to 3, I would do Vom Boden shit. And then I'd go to bed, and then I'd wake up at 6 and do it again. And there was many. That's a
lot of sweat equity.
It's a fucking lot, man.
Yeah.
And not to like, but on the other hand, like the fact that I could scrounge together 20, 30 grand from my in-laws, like that's not nothing, right? A lot of the fact that my wife could help out, like there's the luck part is a huge factor.
Luck
in that,
is,
for sure.
I mean, I try and explain that to people too. Like, how do you get in the wine business? And I don't know if I dated a woman who went to Wesleyan, and then we broke up, and I kept hanging out at Wesleyan, and then I dated another woman, and like this woman best friend was this guy who was friends with John Capon. I met John Capon. Like it had nothing.
Yeah.
I like just weird shit.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like there's so much luck involved in life.
Yeah, there is.
You know, you have to be prepared, but we don't want to, and like it's stuff that you don't control that just happens.
Yeah, for sure. And you have to like, you know, you do have to jump, and you have to like recognize the opportunities, but you also need some tailwinds, man.
Yep.
You know, and like it doesn't happen without those tailwinds for sure.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, like how many people, and just I love the humility, like, because your in-laws could give you 20, 30 grand, right? Like there's people whose in-laws can't do that,
for
right?
sure.
But you worked from 9 to 3 for a while. And you know what I mean? So it wasn't like, hey, I got this money, I'm just chilling. Yeah, like, I think at the end of the day, you have to work hard at this at some point. You got to get enough momentum. Like a plane has to get up to momentum, or it's not getting off the ground, right? And then you can cruise, but getting it off the ground, you humped your ass.
Yeah,
man.
and you know, and they owned a good amount of the company, and I bought it back from them at a good profit for them. So it's like. And, you know, again, it's the luck part is there, but also the integrity and the like. Yeah. I don't know. I've always fucking mowed lawns, dude. Even when I had leukemia, this is the truth. I had what do you call it? Paper route.
Paper route.
And dude, when I was too sick to ride my bike, my mom would like drive me around, and I'd sit. So again, it's always the help, right? It's like I was doing it, but I also was in the backseat with my mom because I just like could not, after treatments, I could not cycle around. I'd throw the shit out. So you have to, I don't know. There has to be some serious grit, but you also need the help. That's it.
For sure. So what does Vom Boden mean, and what's the philosophy behind it?
Yeah, so Vom Boden means from the soil. So Vom is from, and Boden means floor, but it's like people talk about when you're in the vineyard, say das Boden ist, the soil is that. So it means from the soil. And honestly, I wanted something that was like Germanic because I knew that was like the focus. And two, I wanted something that sounded kind of cool.
Yeah.
And a lot of German wines, man, or the German words, there's a lot of like R's and W's and PF's and like really unfortunate places for the American tongue. So I was like, I came up with that phrase and I was like, that sounds fucking cool. It's like slightly aristocratic, like Vom Boden, right? People often are like, oh, are you Mr. Vom Boden? I'm like, I should probably change my name.
You should.
It's like definitely better than Bitterolf.
Like better call Saul.
Stefan Vom
Boden.
That sounds awesome.
Vom Boden.
So that's what it means. But I did actively and consciously not want to name the company after myself. I feel like a lot of importers, it's my import company, right?
I mean, you know,
it is what it is. I get it. On the other hand, I do think that like
so selection.
Yeah,
that's the game, right?
For me, I'm the least important part of this fucking story. My job is to like bleed for the growers, but the growers, and this is not like romantic bullshit, but like, dude, at the end of the day, I move things around and I mark them up. And I spend a lot of my time and energy showing people that I fucking care and that I know and that I want to be there for them. But I'm also not in the vineyards. If I lose 50% of the harvest, like I still have wines to sell. I can buy more from someone else, right? They're on the front lines, and they, to me, are unequivocally and unquestionably the rock stars. And so it was like, it doesn't need to be Stephen Bitterolf Selections, man. I don't know. It's just like, maybe if my name was Stephen Vom Boden, I would have called it because that sounds cooler. Yeah. But it didn't need to be about me, and it still isn't.
Oh, man. So what does like a trip for an importer look like?
That's great. So here's what it is. It's always having it's flying with the same company so that you can at least get knocked up to like what is that, economy plus, right? Man, if I can, because I'm 6'1", 6'2", like, oh god. Normally I'm in the back of the plane, like next to the toilet, but if I fly with the same, I can. So that's it. You got like if you can get economy plus, oh god, for those overnight flights, dude, that's critical. Always order vegetarian on the plane. I just do not think that chicken is chicken. There's like no chance that chicken is more than 62% chicken. Do you know what I mean? Like, come on. Just don't eat chicken served on don't do it. So always do vegetarian. Drink a ton of water. But basically, the thing is they are incredibly fun. They're incredibly informative. You learn more in 6 minutes with a winemaker in the vineyard or in the cellar than you do listening to this whole thing, even though this is a great interview and you're both very intelligent, so am I. But, like, it's just different. You feel, you smell everything. Yeah. So honestly, I have a reputation in the company. I mean, it's only 5 other people, but of going very hard and forgetting about lunch. And people just be like, I wouldn't mind, like, if I do coffee. I'm like, really? We'll do 4th visit, though, and then after our 8th, we'll do. So I usually do a 9 a.m. visit. I do a noon visit. If I can, I do an afternoon visit. Then I do a visit at dinner. And then I go to bed at midnight to 1. Skip the Spargel schnapps. Someone is giving you schnapps. You're going to think it's a good idea because, like, you're like on a travel high. Skip the Spargel, especially if it's Spargel schnapps.
What's Spargel?
Spargel is what is that? What are those long things that are coming in season right now? I want to say avocado, but it's not that. They like there's white ones and green ones.
Oh, asparagus.
Asparagus. Thank you. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Spargel.
Yeah.
There was a big like Spargel festival. The reason I say this, dude, Spargel is like a religion in Germany. In Austria right now, as it comes out, it is like it's the equivalent of ramps. Wow. Right? People are just they're into it. They're not as boutique-y as ramps, but like, man, when you travel now in Germany, guaranteed to get 3 to 5 meals a day of Spargel. Like, if you have that urine thing, like, oh man. So there's like a Spargel festival, and someone brought Spargel schnapps, and like we're just like, man, at 3 a.m, we're like, dude, Spargel schnapps is exactly how this evening should end. And we learned the next morning that was exactly how the evening should not end. So spit a lot, try and get some sleep, but then it goes again, and that's it. And you just power through it, and that's what we were talking earlier. When you get home, these trips are among the most amazing, dehydrating, just kind of difficult physically, mentally, and emotional trips that you take. When you get home, I do think I've lost a few days of my life. Yeah. On the other hand, there's not a day that goes by and not a time when I talk with anyone who works for me that I'm not like, every fucking breath is a gift. The fact that I get to do this and call this work is a fucking blessing. And like, you forget that and you start dying slowly. So it's like, go hard, enjoy it, drink a lot of water, but that's what it is, and hopefully there's some sun and wind and the vineyards are steep so you can sweat a little bit of that shit out. But Riesling is like energy juice for me. Like the acid, the low alcohol. I mean, man, I like it. It's 15 years and I still, like most nights, I'm like, what should I drink tonight?
Wow. Oh, for Riesling.
Oh, for Riesling. I drew rabbits when I was an artist. I drew rabbits for 10 years. So I do have a...
What's with the rabbits?
So my first artistic crisis was when I was living in Vienna.
Yeah.
I was studying there. I did 1 semester abroad, and I lived with my cousin. And like the rabbit, that's a Dürer, this old German artist. It's sort of like the I Love New York thing for Vienna. Like it's everywhere.
Okay.
It's on posters, on like blah blah blah. And I bought like a notebook, and I was like, and I had my first like, what am I gonna do as an artist? Like I don't know. And so the rabbit, the Feldhase, was on the cover of this like drawing book. And I'm like, all right, I'll just draw this until like I know, like I'll study this, I'll work on technique, and then eventually I'll have like a good idea and I'll be an artist. And I never had that good idea. So for like 12 years, I just fucking drew the thing over and over again. They became very big, and I did learn something with every single one of them. I think I did 40 some, maybe the high 40s. And I would like sell them, and like it went really well. They're very big. They're about 5 feet tall and 4 feet wide.
Oh, wow.
And then like after number 48, I was like, 48 is no better than 47. And I was like, I'm done. And then I just never drew a rabbit again.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, it was just arbitrary. There's something intriguing about it, but I'm not like a rabbit fanatic by any means. You know, I don't have pets. I have 2 kids. It's the same.
So you started out. You said you started out with 4.
4 growers. Yep.
Growers. So how many are in your book now, and how do you expand your book? Like, how did you grow the company out?
That is the hugest thing, and honestly, so you know. I think when you first do this, you're just like trying to keep your head above water, right? There's I like this. I think these people are good people. I think the wines tell something different. But otherwise, you put your head down, you fucking work. And then after a few years, you're like, all right, you know, what if I'm also interested in this? But why? Blah blah blah. So it's almost like then you get 2 or 3 years into it, and you look back, and you're like, huh. What is the thread that connects all, or what is really important to me? Because otherwise, I'm just fucking spinning my head and running around and like trying to make $1, right? Which I am, but I would like there to be some greater purpose. I'm a like semi-reflective human, and after a while, I was like, man, I like small growers. To me, that is people talk about natural wine or unnatural wine or commercial wine, and to me, I think there's incredibly valid arguments for all that. There's great arguments for abstract art, and there's great arguments for representational. There's great arguments for acoustic, and there's great arguments for electric guitar, but like you need both of them. Like there's an appropriate context for all of this shit. The one thing that is unquestionable for me is the small grower. And what I mean by that is the person whose name is on the label is in the vineyard or is in the cellar and is making the wines, and like their son or daughter is working, or the family is involved in it, and I am dealing with growers whose fingernails are dirty and who do the labor, and not with the vice president of exports for the US and the UK. It's just, again, this is not a qualitative thing. There's very good, huge estates. I just have zero interest personally in dealing with it. To me, there are great, huge biodynamic corporations now that are co-opting that, and they don't pay their labor that well, and a lot of the practices, how they really function in the world, I think are probably not that emblematic of what the biodynamic But you have a small grower whose kid is playing in the vineyard because they come with them, and they're going to be very thoughtful of what they spray. They might not be biodynamic because there's a lot of politics around all that shit, and the EU has their finger in kind of everything. But like they're going to make they're going to make good decisions because their children are there, and this is probably a vineyard they got from their grandparents, and they probably want their children to work it, right? So I'm very dubious about the power of large corporations that always have, or even medium-sized companies, right? That like have good intentions, but it's, you know, you have to follow fashions and you have to follow whims. And the truth of the matter is too, if you have a lot of product to sell, you almost by definition have to hit an average, right? It has to be every year kind of good enough, but not too crazy, not too much of this.
No, 100%.
And the small grower who doesn't they can be their little indie film, man. And if it only appeals to like 10 people, I have to find those 10 people and sell the wines. But I do think small producers like just make more curious wines, and sometimes they're not better, but they have a certain human quality to them, right? And that's what I react to. Did I answer your question? How do I find growers?
Yeah. I mean, did your first 4 just start saying, "Hey, Mike, I have a friend," or
No, almost.
or did people start hearing about you because your integrity, or
No, now it's a huge. It is still flattered. I'm like, my mom and I are both surprised where I'm in business. It is a little bit surprising when I'll email people and they're like, "Oh, I know Vom Boden." I'm like, "Wow, that's fucking cool."
yeah,
For the most part, no, though. I mean, yes and no, right? Most of it wasn't growers talking to other growers.
Okay.
Most of it was like, I don't know. I mean, back in the day, it was like, I'm interested in regions, and you just do the work. You drive around the regions. Like Hild is a producer I bring in from the Obermosel, which was this area I just like read about, mostly in German, and like seen some weird maps, but I'd never seen a bottle of wine in the U.S. I'd never heard anyone seriously talk about this. It was just like, how in the flying hell, 10 minutes from Egon Mueller, from one of the most famous German winemakers, there's an entire region that is limestone and is made out of this Kimmeridgian limestone at that, is made from this grape Elbling, which is supposed to be one of the oldest grapes in Europe, but I've never heard anyone talk about Elbling. And so I fucking drove there and just spent 2 days driving around and knocking on doors and tasting Elbling. And then found this one producer, a small family estate, Hild. And like, I liked them. And the wines were simple, but honest. And I remember thinking, holy fuck, like, my wife was already questioning a lot of my business decisions. It was just like, really? German wine? Like, yeah, I think it'll be okay. And then I was like, man, I'm going to bring in like Elbling. Like, I want to do it. I think it's important, but like, if I can break even with this shit, like that will be the goal. Right. And it's become like incredibly successful. People, the family is soulful. The wines are good. They're well priced. I'm also a huge fan of like the $20 bottle of wine. Yeah. It's just like, man, great. If you have a $2,000 bottle of wine that's good, it fucking should be. I think it's $2,000.
Hell yeah.
Right?
Hell yeah.
But if it's $20 and it comes from someone authentic and real and the wine is good, and you're like, man, I want average reality more than I want Technicolor fantasy. I want a fucking okay bottle of wine from a great human as opposed to like a great bottle of wine from a questionable human. And you find that. You just have to get out and shake hands and press flesh, The answer now is Instagram. That's how I find it now.
Wow.
Everything's Instagram now. Now you don't have to press. You just like, search friends. I don't know. It's crazy now. The amount of information you can glean on Instagram is just like ridiculous.
So what had you, was it Instagram? What had you go to like France? What type of wine what region in France are you importing from?
So I have 2 producers, 3. The first one was Migaud, who's in Alsace and Lorraine.
Yep. Okay.
North of that. So, and honestly, it was through recommendation of Pascaline Lepeltier, who's a good friend and a somm of some repute in New York. One of the most brilliant wine minds, I think, in the world.
She's
Certainly
really
in New York,
smart.
she
really
can do
smart.
anything, man. And so she was like, she knew I was interested in these style wines.
Yep.
And it was like, these are people that are on the Moselle, which is how you say it in French. The Mosel as a river starts on the west flank of the Vosges in Alsace, and it kind of like flows up. So this is,
okay.
It's basically Mosel wine. It's just in France. And it's high acid, super sharp. And she was like, I don't know, it seems reasonable. My wife's family is from Alsace. And they're constantly like, really, you're importing German wine? Yeah, like, okay, they look at me funny, but like they have some Riesling in Alsace, they kind of get it. Yeah. And then finally I got this producer, and I was like, hey, I have a producer, from this region, and they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, never heard of him, never heard of this place. And it's like, okay, so deep in esoterica for sure. Côte de Toul, Migaud, and they live 2 hours away. It'd be like, I have a producer in New York being like, I have a producer from like Philly. And I'd be like, Philly? What's Philly? What's Philadelphia? Yeah. So they had no idea. And then I have one champagne producer, and this came back. Yeah, I have one champagne producer who makes amazing champagnes, and they are affordable and well priced. And that was my big shtick, was just like, I love champagne. I drank a ton of champagne at Crush. It was great. And then I had to buy my own wine and not have people open it for me. And all of a sudden, that faucet went really dry. And I like champagne, but a lot of it seems to me to be slightly overpriced.
Yeah, I mean,
and you open $200 bottles, and it's like, man, like, one, I can't do that on the regular, and 2, I don't think it's that.
Give me a good, like, there's some killer shit like at $70, like killer.
Yeah,
50 to 70, you can find some just like blind taste.
Yep.
Just fucks those other wines up.
Yeah.
To be honest,
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
and they're more interesting, like you said. You know.
And the way that came about was that was a recommendation. So Vollenweiter, who's a producer of mine in the Mosel, he's a Swiss guy, and he went to the Mosel to make wine. But when he started his estate, he bought 1 hectare of vineyards. Again, like had to make a living, and so he imported French wines into Germany, and he had a little side hustle selling wines. And I was bitching to him one day about how expensive champagne was, and he was like, "You should go see these people. Like they're really good people, and the wines are like affordable." And I was like, "Sign me up!" And I just fucking drove there and introduced myself, and that's it. So
that's so cool. And then we also Austria, which obviously I want to say makes sense because dry whites, but also the U.S. You have like a few producers from the U.S.
Yep. The U.S. portfolio, the domestic portfolio, makes no sense, literally, to me even.
Yeah.
So anyone looking for like logic or a rationality will not find it. It's totally human driven. I meet people I really like. I think the wines are important or interesting or good or just like soulful. And if they want to come along, I'm like, it's very few and probably is never going to be a big focus.
Right.
And I work so eclectically that like I don't have to make sense. Do you know what I mean? I'm kind of sort of like David Byrne. I don't know, like I stop making. It doesn't need to make sense because I'm not doing big volumes where like there has to be a logic. I don't have to be comprehensive. I have no desire to be. I'm not shopping for a $15 whatever Syrah from the Central. Like if I meet someone who I think is really interesting, and if they're interested, then it works, and otherwise it doesn't. So it's 100% like kind of human driven, which is kind of how it should be, maybe. But it's eclectic. So I have a great producer on Long Island who's a good friend before, but who just does soulful, quirky shit. And it was like, man, you should get that out there, and kind of help them do that. I have some great producers in California. I have great producers in Oregon, but all very tiny and very person oriented.
Yeah. Let's talk about climate change and how that has how it's been a boon for German wines, if you will, to be honest. But let's talk about it.
Yeah, that's the honest to God truth. Yeah, a lot of so the old saying with German wines, especially when you get into the cold regions, right, is you'd have 1 to 2 great vintages a decade, then you'd have 3 okay vintages, and then you'd have 4 vintages that were bad, and then you'd have 1 disaster. So German wine was always threading this needle of just barely being ripe, and that was the kind of magic of them. When they hit that tone, it's like with anything, right? When you're right on the edge, it's always a little bit the most magical.
Yeah.
And that's where they were. And the relationship of German wines with residual sugar, the sugar is irrelevant. Think about the sugar in German wine as how you deal with acid. The center of all German wine is acidity. It's unquestionably that. And so the question of making sparkling, that's a way of dealing with acid. Having a little residual sugar left in the wine, that's a way of dealing with psychotic levels of acid. Releasing wines later or aging them, another way of dealing with acid, right? So everything about the culture of German wine was how to deal with acid. And the dry wines, they would make them, the Mosel especially was very famous for dry wines, but they'd make them in the riper vintages, and they would be, I think, to our palates, bracing, right? And they would need time. I mean, the speed at which this change has happened is almost inconceivable. Lauer's father was selling wines 2 years post-vintage, right? This was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? If you had a dry wine that was high acid, very low residual sugar, it's like biting into a lemon while your finger's in the electrical socket, and having salt sprayed on your face. It's it's biting, man. It hurts, right? It's zingy. And the way you dealt with that was you left it in the fucking cellar for 3 years and it mellowed out, and then you sold it and people are like, wow, that's good. But we don't there's no time is not, time is money. So that pace of life, that goes back to the Kaffee and Kuchen, that doesn't happen anymore. It's go, go, go. But now with climate change, literally almost every vintage is right in the sweet spot. A lot of places were in the sweet spot and are being pushed out of it a little bit. And Germany has the exact opposite issue. So it's gone from right on the edge to under to right now in the golden spot. And, there's no one that is thrilled with this, right? I love German wines, and the quality, the renaissance that's happening right now has never been better. There's never a time can say this with some confidence, even though most of the time I wasn't alive to experience it. But I would guess for the last 2,000 years, there's never been a moment in German wine where they have made such great wine so consistently at almost every level, right? The dry wines now, they're not only better, you'll talk to like the old timers, like, German dry wine, it's too sour, And yeah, it probably was oftentimes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not that like now we just like sour wines. It's that the ripeness levels are higher and the acidity is a touch lower and the wines are fucking good. And these places that like we're always on the edge, like the Mosel and even the Saar, oh God, in the next like 5, 10, 20 years, oh my Lord, these dry wines are going to come into some sort of like holiness. Now, it is what it is, I mean, it's climate change. I think if we could go back to the former, we would. But that is the truth. A lot of the rise in quality is that. I also, though, don't want to underplay the growers.
No. I think,
the return to the vineyard and the actual work in the vineyard is also a huge part of the change.
I mean, but it's across the board. It's in the Finger Lakes. Yep. It's on Long Island.
Yep.
You get your achieve ripeness levels. Let's pivot. Red wines from Germany, because I know there's some really.
That's also happening. I mean, that's another
good, So, Spätburgunder, Zweitgelt, Blaufränkisch. Just break those three down for people kind of quickly.
Yeah. So Spätburgunder is Spätburgunder is Pinot Noir. The Burgunder. Anytime you see Burgunder, you can replace Pinot. So you have Weißburgunder, that is white Pinot, Pinot Blanc. Grauburgunder, that is gray Pinot Gris.
Yep.
Spätburgunder doesn't refer to the color; it refers to the harvesting later.
Okay.
They ripen later, so it's late harvested Burgundy, Pinot Noir. And so the relationship between red wine and German wine is complex, and a lot of this I'm trying to do research. I'm working on a book, and I'm trying to kind of like to understand this history. My interpretation of it is that red wines have always been a part of German wine culture.
Yeah.
But it was a fucking cool region. And so a lot of the reds would have been more in the line of like how we think about rosés, right? Drink them young, they're light and fresh and blah, blah, blah. And that was the red wine culture. And the white wine culture was really the Van de Garde. That was the fancy shit. And the reds were, the rosés. You take them down, they're good on the patio, and that's kind of it. Sometime around the 80s, 90s, 2000s, things start getting a little bit ripening again. Climate changes. I don't want to downplay that, but I also don't want to downplay the importance of the growers doing more and more work. The thing that happened, because of Germany being on the border of ripeness, there's been historically this focus on ripeness, right? The riper the wine, the grape rather, the greater the wine. And so when they first started making red wines, my research and my kind of experience and some just kind of guesswork is that like I think they basically were like, all right, the greatest wines are the ripest wines. And this is also parallel. It's weaving itself around Robert Parker and his kind of worship of ripeness and new wood. And so they start in the 90s start saying, all right, we can now really ripen Pinot Noir. So what we're going to do is get it super ripe because that's the best, right? Because we're on the border of ripeness. And then we're going to put a lot of new wood on it because that's also the best. And so a lot of these wines from the 90s, the beginning of the serious red wines in Germany were very like oaky and a little bit hollow feeling because even super ripeness in Germany is not ripeness in Rioja, right? There's a difference. And it took them a little bit of time, somewhere around, to me, the mid-2000s, 05 or so, they start realizing that it's not just ripeness, it's how old is the vine, like how good is the vineyard, how delicate is the élevage, how good are the barrels, right? There's a whole science and culture of barrels. Getting good barrels that have a little bit of wood influence but not too much, blah, blah, blah. So that is a huge part of the brew. And then the other huge part of it is just cultural exchange, young Germans going into Burgundy and working in Burgundy and going to New Zealand and going to Australia and California and vice versa. That there was this more experience on how to really do élevage. And so I think really in the last 15 years, Pinot Noir has kind of broken through. And to me, I'd be shocked, and already it's happening, that serious Burgundy collectors call me up and they're just like, I'm still buying my Burgundy, but I'm getting a little tired of like $2,500 bottles and like $200 bottles of Village level, right? Yeah. And they're like, and for fucking $50 in German wine, you get something very serious from old vines. And so to me, it's not a question of when, or not a question of if, it's a question of when. Is it like next year or is it 2 years from now? Most of the stuff I bring in, it's like it sells out pretty quickly. because I think the wine is incredibly good, and also because it's small production, right? And because it's well priced. And that is, it's not a wildly complicated formula. Like make it honest, make it good, affordable, and don't have that much of it. Like boom, not high dollar and it's inefficient, but it's a good way of just kind of getting by, right? For them and for us.
Yeah. Last Riesling study, I know you weren't there. You had something to do that weekend.
I think it was in traveling. I think it was in Germany.
We're traveling. But Robert brought like a German Chardonnay.
Oh.
I don't know if it was from your book, but like super limited, and it tasted like white Burgundy.
Yeah.
And I forget who he said, but like there was a German.
Was it Moritz? Because it had like a grape on the thing that like caricatures of grapes.
There was yellow on the label for sure.
Yeah. That's Moritz Kissinger.
Yeah. But I forgot who it was. It was a pretty famous Burgundy producer. I don't want to misquote, but like, who's been tasting like the Burgundian varietals, and he's like, in the end, Germany's going to win. Like it's because of the price too. Is another thing too. I think Burgundy is such a luxury item.
Yeah.
At a lot of to find a killer like $30 Village wine. Like you want that, but like it's but like why sell it for 30 when I could sell it for 90? I mean that's like
sure.
I
think with all these discussions about like the rise of Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, or a lot of the Burgundian varietals, like we always want to like we love hierarchies,
right? Because it's benchmarks and hierarchies, right?
But I think it's useful at least to kind of try and step away. And again, I get sucked into this all the time, and I just do it all the time. But like at the end of the day, the role of German Pinot Noir is not to beat Burgundy, and vice versa.
It's supposed to give a sense of the place it's from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I do think you can talk qualitatively.
Yes.
And just say they are, it's like you put fucking Picasso next to Matisse, and it's like, to me, wine is a cultural product, and that's why after studying art history, I got into this.
Yep.
And no one would in their fucking right mind ever try to talk to you into like, Bryce Martin is 100 points and this artist is 98 points. It's like, what are you fucking talking about? Yeah. No one would ever say that about music, about I like this for this reason, but you would never rank shit. But with wine, somehow we're like, to me, these are cultural expressions and they have a context and a place. And like German, I 100% agree with you. And it is happening now, and it's already, to some extent, by the time you know it's happening,
oh, it's happened. It's happened.
Yeah,
that's
German wine
thing.
has happened, and from 2005 to before that, it's always like, man, German band, and it's true for 5-10 years. It was like, man, you fucking bang the gong constantly, and you're just constantly like slam door in your face. And then something happened. Dude, the amount of
Riesling?
I mean, dude, the amount
that
of times
shit's allocated now, bro.
The amount of times I'd sit down with people and taste like 10 different Rieslings and just have their fucking head explode and just be like, oh my God, just like every wine is better than the next. And then I'd kind of like finish up my show and put the wines back in the case and like slide over the price and just be like, all right, and they'd be like, oh, no, I'm sorry. I already have one Riesling on the shelf, and like that's all I could do. And you'd be like, oh my God. That is not happening. It is, German wine is in a great place. And to be perfectly honest, and this comes up in my brain because I think Burgundy has kind of gone too far, and it makes me sad that like some of these things that, when I first got into it, $200 was a lot to spend on a bottle of wine, but you could do that, and you had to like, you could do that. Now you can't. And that's a fucking shame for culture. All these things, right? It's the same thing with like de Koonings and sculptures going into billionaires. It's like takes it out of the public discourse, and that's a fucking shame. So German wine, I'm happy its prices are going up because to some extent, especially with like a lot of Mosel producers, it was just unsustainable.
Right.
People are living hand to mouth, and like, dude, you have to pay a person like a not only a living wage, but like a wage that rewards their work and rewards more work and gives to some extent money as a sign of gratitude, right?
Yeah,
and it's like,
for sure,
thank you for this, right?
For sure.
So that's good when it goes too far, and it's and our kids are like, well, yeah, I'd sure love to taste German wine, but I can't. That'll be a fucking shame.
Yeah. So Rieslingfeier. How did Rieslingfeier? What was the inspiration? Another crazy idea of yours?
No. Well, yes. Here's how it went down. I was with Klaus-Peter Keller, who's a pretty famous winemaker in Germany now at the time, but at the time was whatever, like famous but not as famous. And we were pretty drunk, and it was like 2 a.m, and I was like, man, I'd gone to La Palais, this Burgundy festival, a number of times, and I was like, dude, it's cool. You just like all these people get together, and you just like open wines, and he said to me, he was like, listen, put together something like that, like. If it's going to be 10 people in a room with a bunch of wine, like that'll be fine. Like who cares? I don't want the grandiosity of Burgundy and a lot of the kind of pomp and circumstance. Pomp and circumstance is fine. I'm not again qualitatively, it's just not my thing.
Yep.
I was like, I just want to have like these dorks. German wine collectors are like old Burgundy collectors. They're stamp collectors. They're just dork out about the dorky shit for the sake of dorkness, right? And I was like, let's get together people. And so he committed. And then I talked to a few other winemakers. I forget who came in for the first one. I think it was Andreas Adam, Katharina Prum, Thomas Haag from Schloss Lieser, Keller. Maybe I'm missing one. I apologize. And we did that. And I was like, oh my God, I put up all my own money for this. And it was like $10K at the time, right? And it was like a significant amount of money for me. It was not it was not to be taken. And again, my wife and like slapping herself on the forehead. My mom's like, oh God, here you go again. And like it just worked. You know what I mean? Like I didn't make that much money, but I got all the money back, and the room had 100 people in it, and people were fucking happy, and it was awesome. And most of the Germans were like, we have never been in a room with so much crazy German wine, right?
Yep.
The thing with collectors, it has, and this is what I love about collecting, if you really get to someone who loves something deeply, the money part fades away. It's not about that. And so people would bring out wines that were like, they probably bought for $5 and are now worth $8. And they'd be like, I bought this, and they'd share it with you. And it's less about how fancy this is and more about this is an experience I want to share. And I have the same problem. I have all these wines in my cellar, some of them expensive, some of them not, most of them not. But you don't want to open it on a Tuesday with no one.
Right.
You want to share it with humans.
Needs to be shared. Yep.
And so all these people, it just gives people a chance to share it with people who kind of get it and will be like, that's fucking cool. You have that wine that no one else cares about except for the 30 people in this room. And that is what Rieslingfeier is about. It's just about getting dorks together who care deeply about this like culture of wine that's not better than any other culture of wine, but you just fucking love it in the same way you love folk music, you know? And that's it. And so just threw it together and it worked. And that was kind of it. So the idea is always to try and make it affordable. It was deeply important to me that this was not like a $2,500 meal that you had to like bring another $2,500 worth. Like I don't roll like that. And so prices have always been about $300. And to give credit where credit's due, I also don't fly in the winemakers. I don't put them up, right? The winemakers contribute that. So like my budget can be, I need to cover, I need to cover the table and the room and the Zaltos and all the other shit, but that's about it. So there's people who come that, are not of huge means, but it's important. And for that amount of money you can. And like that to me is also, I think, a really important part of it. And you feel it too with all the shit Robert does with Riesling study as well.
Yeah.
It's like, there can be some ballers, but there can be other people who are just trying to get into it. And that is the fun, man. Once it's against monotone, it's like, oh, God, do I really want to have dinner just with me?
Yeah.
No, definitely not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And to your point, like at the last Riesling study, like people were like, oh, what should we try, black wine guy? And I was like, you know what I'm gonna try? I'm gonna try this 1976 Trimbach, which was probably $3.
Yeah.
And it was in great shape, like for like a 44-year-old bottle of wine. 40. I was like, that's what I'm gonna try. Like you need to understand that was $3.
Yeah, exactly. Wine and vinyl are a lot. I actually am probably one of the few people in wine that does not collect vinyl, but the connections are so deep. It's like it's just dorking out about this like sliver of culture that's sort of irrelevant, and that's almost the reason why it's so enticing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
totally.
like not in the center.
You're right. Literally, it's like I had Skinny Pablo on yesterday. And I was like, one thing I love about Robert's soundtracks is it's like he plays the original song that was sampled by hip hop, right? So like so you said, like you're geeking out on that, like oh, you listen to his album shout for this hook that Q-Tip caught that became XYZ, and then you hear the whole story like, oh, that's so fucking dope. You know? So, one last question.
Yeah, man.
Bottle of Riesling that started all what was the bottle where you like, oh, this is acid, this is it. If you can remember, because you've had so many.
Yeah, I do remember some of the early, at the 2000, 2005, wines you could find, widely were, one of them is J.J. Prum, who's remains a canonical producer. And I remember drinking like 98 Bernkasseler Badstube Cabinet, and also reading a book called The Wine Bible. I think her name is Karen McNeil.
Yeah.
Dude, people have asked me, like, how I think that book, for what it covers, is unbelievable. It's like readable. It's funny. You can read it. You don't have to like really care that much about wine. You can just have it on your shelf and like you drink something, you look it
It's
up.
like a reference book. Yeah, I love
but
it.
it's well done. It's
Yep.
not just like
Yep.
there's 10,000 hectares of Muller Turgon. You're like, is 10,000 a lot? And what's Muller? Like, who
Right,
cares?
right.
But it tells the story. And I remember reading the wine Bible, and it was some story about how like the people in the Mosel, the slate, these big stones and these really steep vineyards like falls to the bottom, and the people like put them in buckets and carry it up to the top and dump it back down. And I was like, that is like absolutely fucking insane. I love that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
To me, I don't. Maybe it's just being an artist, or what you just the act, like an irrelevant and courageous act of humanity that is going to be washed back down, and then you just do it again. That's fucking life, right? It's just
Yep.
like you get up and you do it, and at the end of the day, it might not have any meaning. That's okay. The meaning is just doing it, right? And I was like that, and drinking the wine. I was like, man, this is every breath is a gift. That's it.
We're gonna stop there. Steven, thank you so much,
Dude,
man.
thank you. Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming in. Tell people where they can find you, how they can be a part of what you're doing at Vom
Yeah,
Boden.
so, I mean, basically every email address, info@vomboden.com, orders at vomboden.com, HR@vomboden.com. They all come to me because there's not that many people. I'm the HR and accounting department. Yeah, so info@vomboden.com, just vomboden.com. That's VOM as in Mary, BODEN as in Nancy.com. And like kind of all the info's there. I'm on Instagram, I don't know. I don't do Facebook. I think I'm on Facebook, but I don't really know how to do it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of Instagram or website or email.
Nice.
Or,
Email.
come to a Riesling study.
Yeah,
or
come to a Riesling
Rieslingfeier.
study for sure, or Rieslingfeier. I'm gonna have to come to Rieslingfeier next time.
Hopefully we can do it this year.
Yeah. All right, everybody, all you listeners out there, don't forget to check the show notes, because that's where we'll have all the information on the wine we drank, links to cool stuff that we discussed. You'll find we'll put all Steven's links to the website and his socials in there. Until the next time, my friends, cheers to all the mavericks, philosophers, deep thinkers, and Riesling drinkers. Peace. Okay, we're clear. I know, man.
Whoa.
Thank you, Steven.
Oh, yeah, dude. I hope that was okay. I never
Oh
like
my
these things are like,
So much about German wine.
Joe Kenny.
God, I like, you never know, you like, it's just like,